Hello and welcome to sj'sclasses. Let me begin today's session by thanking all those who regularly watch my video lessons. There are some among you who post comments and feedback regularly. I would like to thank you from the bottom of my heart for doing this. I would also like to request you to share the materials that I post on YouTube to those who are in need. It's tough times and it might be tough times ahead. So learners, students might be in need of such materials. So if there are any whom you know, whom you are aware of, please do forward these video lessons to them. Today we will discuss the final part of the poem Lay of the Anklet, written by Dr. K. Ayyappa Paniker. In my previous two video lessons, I discussed the first part and the second part. I had also posted an introductory video on Dr. K. Ayyappa Paniker and the poem Lay of the Anklet. Please go to my YouTube channel to watch all these video lessons. In the first part of the poem, Dr. K. Ayyappa Paniker evoked the tragic story of Kannagi in the minds of the readers. The second part is a poetic recreation of the romantic mood of Kannagi and Kovalan, and also Madhavi's intervention in their lives. It ends with Kannagi's emotional turmoil having to suffer another woman in their lives. The last part is a poignant outburst describing the agonies that Kannagi had to face in life, and also Prince Elangovadigal's treatment of the Kannagi story. The final part is indents with numerous images of a wronged woman on one hand and of a woman who transcends the social construct of gender on the other hand. Let's read the first stanza of the third and final part. The woman who burnt Madura with grief or wrath wept from the eastern hills. The reference is to Kannagi, the woman who burnt Madura, and she burned it because of her grief or wrath. Wrath means intense anger. She burned it because of her sorrow, grief, or intense anger. Her anger against the king who killed Kovalan, blaming that he had stolen the anklet of the queen. And that is why Kannagi took revenge on the king and his city, which is Madurapuri or Madura. No one today to call me sweetheart. The line separating sky and sea defies erasure. So, as I said in my previous classes, the ending of Kannagi's story is that she crosses the eastern hills to the land of Kodungallur, and there she settles as a deity. So as of now, she has taken her revenge. She is crossing the eastern hills and she is en route Kodungallur, and she thinks about her life. She has no one today to call her sweetheart. That marks the death of Kovalan, and the horizon seems like never ending, one that stretches far and far away. The line separating sky and sea defies erasure. She talks about the horizon. The horizon seemed never ending. The sun unwilling to rise. The white lotus of dawn slowly unfolding itself paints the blue sky in colors only to be blotted out by clouds, rendering the sky colorless again. So as she looks around, everything seems to be working against her desires. She feels so lost that she has only the endless sea and the colorless sky to offer her some solace. Long ago, when the morning sky was robbed of its crimson by the thieving winds, when the mind and the body outgrew childish pranks, when chuckles of delight and quivers of mirth came for no rhyme, Nor for any reason, her body blossomed into 1,000 blooms of love. Long ago, so she is recollecting something from her past. Long ago, when the morning sky was robbed of its crimson, crimson refers to a deep and vivid red color, something resembling the color of a cherry or a tomato. So, when the morning sky was robbed of its crimson by the thieving winds, the winds that took away the crimson color from the sky. So, winds are referred to as thieves. When the mind and the body outgrew childish pranks, when she stopped having an interest in pranks, childish, kiddish mischiefs. When chuckles of delight, chuckle means a soft, partly suppressed laugh. When chuckles of delight and quivers of mirth means pleasurable sensations of joy or happiness. Now, all these point at a time when she used to enjoy her life or the good part of her life. And quivers of mirth came for no rhyme, nor for any reason. Her body blossomed into 1,000 blooms of love. So the poet paints a picture of her childhood days. That is what she has recollected at the moment. The poet portrays a picture of her childhood days and how later she fell a victim or a prey to the enigmatic or strange emotion called love. She who weaned herself on sights unseen. Weaned means stop depending on. She who loved before she looked. She who donned the phantom gravity of the past. Donned means to wear. Or here, who wore. Who wore the phantom gravity, the strange weight of the past. She who is now an idol of woeful tears. And that marks the present situation of the character, Kannagi. She is at present a deity. She who carries a shattered heart, a broken heart, because she lost her life partner, Covalent. She who is the black flag of doom, a symbol of destruction. She who quenches the fire of fury with her tears. She who satisfies her tears with anger. She who dries her tears in the fire of fury. Look at the intense images that are painted here to describe her feelings and emotions by the poet. She who can turn thunder and lightning into a smile. She who changes the wind into sighs. The ultimate, the immense possibility or the capability or potential of this character are described here by the poet. She who saw her pyre in the wood around, and she who saw destruction in everything around her. She who saw her funeral in each twig. Twig means a small branch or pieces of branches. She who felt within the throes of the world. Throes means sufferings. She who transformed herself into the forest fire. And this refers to the wildfire that destroyed Madura. And came from the forest a most pathetic tinkle, notes like the song of an anklet. So the poet, he sets aside a complete stanza to describe Kannagi's sorrows, her despairs, her faith, her anger, her revenge, and her all-encompassing power that transforms her into a raging fire. So her emotions, feelings, despairs have been given a vivid picture in this stanza. And came from the forest a most pathetic tingle, notes like the song of an anklet. So in these particular lines, you come across a sound, the sound of anklet. This particular sound is important as we are going through the story of the anklet, how an anklet destroyed a person's life. The story that was recounted by Ilango Vadigal in his great epic poem Chilappadigaram. Not for the flower dark shade, not for the flower softness, not for the flower fresh fragrance, not for the flower sweet honey, but for the flower pollen and pollen alone. So it's for this particular aspect that a pathetic tinkle comes from the forest. The poet is possibly alluding or referring the woman to a flower which is admired not for its fragrance or softness or sweet honey, but for its pollen grains. Probably, Kannagi is wallowing in despair for having been deprived even of a child. Or it might be even the social outlook on a woman. It's not the fragrance that matters, it's not the softness or the sweet honey of the flower that matters, but the pollen. And else for the rest, though the rest are yet to see this. So for the others, what is probably more important is the other aspects, but they will possibly come to the same understanding as that of Kannagi. These flowers that before the season stir up the roots with their coquettish lips and merry frolics. Again, we have the comparison between women and flower furthered in this particular stanza as well. These flowers that before the season, before they are mature, stir up the roots with their coquettish lips. Coquettish means evoking sexual interest. And merry frolics. Frolics, enjoyment, recreational activities. And then turn into a charming wonder as they grow up. So they grow up into wonderful human beings. They become wonderful beings as they grow up. Shelf above, sparkling shelf, sometimes shy, sometimes naughty, amid the foliage, to fill them with nightmare, to swell them with mirth, to hold them in embraces, pollen alone for them. Now, all these images are actually analogies drawn with respect to women. The question that the poet or the speaker probably raises is that whether motherhood is the only aspiration of a woman. It is in this context that we understand that this poem as one that is symbolic of modern day aesthetics, where Kannagi is not a deity but an epitome of Indian womanhood. Is this life so long as to take you to Kodungallur in the land of Chera, past Chola's plenty, past Pandya's fame? So these are the regions or lands that she crossed to reach Kodungallur. She crossed Chola dynasty, and she also crossed the Pandya dynasty, and finally she comes to settle down at the Chera dynasty. The speaker asks, the poet asks, why did she have to suffer so much? The poet seems to question Ilango Adigal's treatment of the story. Noon, brief meditation, in the shade among the cliffs. When is this life's sacrifice? So it's noon time, and probably Kannagi stops for a short, slight meditation. And probably she is thinking, when is this life's sacrifice? When is this life going to end? To the seashore before the nightfall. Query to the Ashtadikpalas. Ashtadikpalas are the gods of 8 directions in Hindu mythology. Query to the Ashtadikpalas, guardsmen of the 8 directions, on the meaning of the other life. So probably the character wants to inquire about afterlife. What is going to happen to her once she dies? And she has this particular question to the Ashtadikpalas. Is it one's duty linking 2 seas? Now, is it my duty to link here and the later, this life and the other life? She has a question for them. Now we have yet another question. Who is this? The prince who tries to pick up fragments of imagination. So we have the poet Dr. K. Ayyappa Paniker coming to the scene, and he asks, who is this? The prince who tries to pick up fragments of imagination. The reference to is Prince Ilango Adigal, and Dr. K. Ayyappa Paniker asks, is he a prince who is picking up fragments of imagination, fragment of a story from mixed with imaginations, or a sage who has lost his way? So is he a prince or a sage, or a bard in search of the blossom? Bard means a lyric poet. Is he a lyric poet who is in search of verse, or a dreamer, or a dream? Or did he dream this story? Is he a dream? Or the mirror that reflected the land's grief as the brother went out to conquer the Himalayas? Was Ilango Adigal sharing the grief regarding the misery of the people of his land while his brother, the king, who was busy conquering kingdoms? The reference to brother or the brother refers to the brother of Ilango Adigal, who is Senguttavan or Chenguttavan, the reputed warrior king and the most celebrated ruler of the Chera dynasty. His military achievements are also narrated in Shilapadigaram, though in an exaggerated manner. So he was busy conquering foreign lands, and was Ilango Adigal trying to share his grief regarding the misery of the people while his brother was away? You hear the sad notes of your life flowing like a sorrowing rivulet. So you can hear the sad notes of your life flowing like a sorrowing rivulet. Rivulet means a small stream. As the single anklet is flung on the eastern horizon. So when this happens, you can actually pick out the sad moments or sad notes of your life. Burning, the skyline burning, columns of smoke joining the clouds layer after layer. What hellfire, what shellfire, what funeral pyre breeds poetry. So we have crossed into that part where Dr. K. Ayyappa Paniker questions what is actually original poetry, or what is it that creates poetry. What funeral pyre breeds poetry? Whose grief did the prince blend with this old tale? So whose was the grief that has been incorporated into the poem? So Dr. K. Ayyappa Paniker asks several questions. So he is not really satisfied with Ilango Adigal's treatment of Kannagi's story. That is why perhaps he has so many clarifications to make. Here is flesh and blood breeding raw poetry. Ayyappa Paniker is so skeptical about whether Ilango Adigal was able to capture the real woo of Kannagi in the poem, and through an emotional rapture he wonders as to what provokes true poetry. And he says, here is flesh and blood breeding raw poetry. Here is Kannagi, an ordinary woman, an ordinary being with flesh and blood becoming the cause for poetry. So it must not have been imagination, or it must not have been dream, or it must not have been a hunt for poetry that created Kannagi and her story. You have a being with flesh and blood. You have an ordinary human being with flesh and blood, and she should have been the cause of your writing, or this must be the cause of poetry. Woman pulsating to statuary even as Thayams are born. Women pulsating to statuary means women become mere statues, turning themselves into statues who cannot express themselves. Even as Thayams are born. Thayam, as you know, is a famous ritual art form that originated in North Kerala, Malabar to be specific. It is known as the dance of gods. It is mostly performed by scheduled caste men. So, woman pulsating to statuary even as Thayams are born. So, even when gods come to life. Now, this particular dance form is considered as the dance of gods, and even when gods come to life, women turn mere statues. And no death for Thayams once born. And thus is poetry engendered. Engendered means given birth to or created. So how is original poetry created? Let's see Dr. K. Ayyappa Paniker's answers. And thus is poetry engendered from agonies, wreaths, sobs and thoughts. So this is from where original poetry is created. From agonies, from pains in your life, wreaths, twists and turns in your life, sobs, sorrow, grief, and thoughts, your thoughts. Poetry is born to him who has no one. It is lulled to sleep in the cradle of the tongue. It is rocked to mirth in the swing of the land. It turns into a dream unknown to man. It is the voice of the one yet to be born. So Ayyappa Paniker gives answers to the question he asked earlier: what provokes true poetry, or what creates original poetry? And he gives these answers in a highly philosophical way. These lines might give different meanings to different readers, so it would be best if I give them over to you to interpret. Poetry is born to him who has no one. It is lulled to sleep in the cradle of the tongue. It is rocked to mirth in the swing of the land. It turns into a dream unknown to man. It is the voice of the one yet to be born. The day has passed, leaving the windows and the back door shut and barred. Initially, we had this question from the speaker, who is probably the poet himself. The castle gates are all barred, yet how did you enter? So that was the question that the speaker asked at the very outset of the poem. So again, as we come to the conclusion, we find that the doors are shut and barred. Only the frightened watchdog barks at the unseen thief in the distance. The dogs might be imagining a thief, or it could be even that there is a thief who has crept into the premise at night. Who is this thief? Let's see. And who is this in the courtyard? Silent, desolate. Now, whoever is in the courtyard is silent and also desolate. Desolate means crushed by grief. And that person is unable to sleep. And finally, the question comes: Ilango Vadigal? Is it Ilango Adigal? Is he being described as thief, someone who stole probably the story of Kannagi and who could not properly treat it? He is therefore desolate, he is silent, and he is unable to sleep. So that is where our poem comes to an end. The poem was probably Ayyappa Paniker's attempt to portray Kannagi as an ordinary girl with her agonies and ecstasies, who was finally successful, unlike in Ilango Vadigal's version of the story. Now, this story is about a woman and her husband as they struggle with the problems of fidelity, right and wrong, and justice. The core themes of Shilpadikaram and the lay of the Anklet are very relevant to the human experience, which is probably why it still is a well read story even today, and it finds resonance in every heart. Thank you so much for watching this video lesson. In the next video lesson, I will discuss yet another Malayalam poet, and that is D. Vinayachandran, and I'll discuss one of his popular poems, Advent. Thank you. I'll see you in the next video lesson.